Hey everyone, and welcome. You know that feeling when you add an S to an English word and something in your brain just goes, wait, is that right? Well, you are definitely not alone. Today, we are tackling one of the most common grammar mistakes out there, and we're going to get it sorted out for good.
All right, I'm going to throw you right into the deep end with a quick test. Take a look at this. What do you think is wrong with this very, very common sentence?
She gave me many furnitures. It sounds almost right, doesn't it? You can kind of hear people saying it. But yeah, it's incorrect. And by the time we're done here, you are going to know exactly why, and more importantly, how to say it perfectly every single time.
So here's our game plan. First, we'll zero in on the mistake itself. Then we're going to pull back the curtain on the simple rule behind it all. After that, we'll blast through a ton of examples, look at a few quirky exceptions, and then wrap it all up with the one big idea you need to remember. Ready? Let's do this. Okay, so we all learned this in English 101, right? One car becomes 2 cars. One book becomes 10 books. You just add an S to make things plural. Easy. But, and this is a big but, that rule just doesn't work for every single noun. And that's where things get a little tricky.
Take the word information. This is a classic example. We never ever say informations. Why? Well, think of it this way. Information isn't a collection of separate little things you can count, like apples in a basket. It's more like a single big concept, kind of like a cloud. You just have information. If you want to talk about one part of it, you'd say a piece of information.
So why can't we just stick an S on words like information or furniture? What's the secret? Well, it all comes down to a really simple grammar concept called the uncountable noun. Let's break down exactly what that means. An uncountable noun is pretty much exactly what it sounds like. It's a word for something you just can't count individually. Think about water. You wouldn't say, I'll have 2 waters, please, right? You'd say some water or a glass of water. And that exact same logic applies to these bigger abstract ideas or words that represent a whole collection of things.
So let's really break down the key differences here. With countable nouns, like car, you can make it plural, 2 cars, and you can use words like many or a few. But with uncountable nouns, like traffic, which is just a word for a collection of cars, you can't make it plural. There's no such thing as traffics. And you use different words, like much or some traffic. Getting this difference is absolutely the key to everything.
All right, enough of the theory. Let's put this into practice. We're going to start with words you probably use all the time, especially at school or at work. Those abstract ideas. Okay, here are 2 of the biggest offenders right here. Research and evidence. Both of these words represent a whole body of work or a collection of facts, not individual items you can count one by one. So you never, ever add an S. It's always all his research and more evidence.
So you're probably thinking, well, how do I talk about these things if I need to be specific? Great question. This is the strategy. You use a unit of measurement or just a more specific, countable word. So instead of researches, you can say 2 studies. Instead of evidences, you could say some key facts. Same thing for a word like advice. You'd give a piece of advice, not advices. Using these alternatives isn't just correct, it actually makes you sound much more clear and precise.
And here are 2 more really common traps. First, you never do multiple homeworks. You just do your homework. If you really need to count it, you talk about your 3 assignments. And oh my gosh, this next one is huge in the professional world. It's always thank you for your feedback. Never, ever feedbacks. Feedback is treated as one single collective idea.
So we've nailed the abstract ideas, but what about actual physical things you can see and touch? Well, it turns out the exact same rule applies to a lot of everyday items and concepts.
Equipment is a really big one. It's a collective word. It means all the tools or machines you need for a job or an activity. So you don't say equipments. It's the same deal with the word stuff. It's an informal general word for a collection of things, so it never ever gets an S.
And here are the correct and, frankly, better ways to talk about these things when you need to be specific. Instead of saying furnitures, just list the items, a couch and 2 chairs. Instead of traffics, talk about what actually makes up the traffic. So many cars. See, it's all about being more precise.
This rule also pops up with experiences. Music refers to the whole art form, the entire concept. So you wouldn't say musics, you'd talk about hearing a great song or 3 new artists. And fun is an abstract feeling, an experience. You can't have 5 funs, you just have so much fun.
All right, English just loves to keep us on our toes, so of course, there are a couple of tricky cases. Let's look at those before we wrap this all up with the most important takeaway.
Now, vocabulary.
is a really interesting one. Most of the time, when you're talking about words in general, it's uncountable. I want to learn new vocabulary. But if you are comparing these specific sets of words that different people know, you actually can say vocabularies. For example, a doctor and a lawyer have very different vocabularies. So you see, context is everything here.
And please don't get tripped up by sleep. When it's a noun, the state of rest, the thing, it's uncountable. You need more sleep. But when you see a sentence like, she sleeps for 8 hours, that S is there because it's a verb. It's an action. It's just the verb being conjugated for she. It's the same word doing two totally different grammatical jobs.
Okay, so how do you make this all second nature? Use this super simple 3-step mental checklist. Anytime you're about to add an S to a noun, just pause for a second. Ask yourself, can I actually count this thing one by one? If the answer is no, then you know it's uncountable, and you need to use a word like some, or much, or a piece of instead.
And this really brings us to the most important point of all. Look, if you take only one thing away from this, let it be this. Don't just try to memorize a long list of words. Instead, focus on understanding the concept of an uncountable noun. Once you truly get the why, that you can't count these big, abstract ideas or collective groups, you'll be able to apply this rule to any new word you come across.
Seriously, getting this one rule down will make your English sound so much more natural and confident. Now that you're a master of uncountable nouns, what's another tricky grammar rule you'd like us to break down next? Let us know. Thanks so much for watching.